Welcome to the Master Brewers Podcast. I'm your host, John Bryce, and today I'm joined by Steve Huffman of Mead O'Brien to chat about boiler safety and brewing applications. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, John.
Now, Steve, you're a longtime contributor to Master Brewers. You're the current president of District St. Louis. You are an instructor at the last Master Brewers 2-week course, Engineering and Utilities course. And an article you just wrote was recently published in the Master Brewers Technical Quarterly, Volume 53, Number 3. So first, before we jump in, I'd just like to say thank you for dedicating so much of your time to Master Brewers.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a great organization, so I'm more than happy to do it.
Good. All right. Well, now that we've talked about how great you are, let's talk about steam, okay?
Okay.
All right. So your article starts off with boiler selection. A small craft brewery can have some pretty dramatic load swings, as you know. So, let's say 5 minutes ago you were boiling wort and heating water, but now you're only calling for steam for, a few seconds at a time every couple of minutes on your keg washer. Could you walk us through the best approach for a small craft brewery to use when they're trying to size a fire tube boiler for a new brewery?
Well, you already qualified it as a fire tube boiler. And what that does is provide you all the capacity you probably need for, varying load swings. However, its recovery time is going to be slow, and it's not going to be very efficient in times of non-use, where you don't have much load. So the water tube approach, however, the combustion gases are outside of the tube, and we're heating just the amount of water that's in the tubes itself, being fed. And right. So the response time is going to be much quicker. So a lot of new, I know there's one manufacturer in particular that I'm thinking of that seems to be making a lot of headway, and it's not a commercial for them, and I don't represent them. So, but in terms of having stackable water tube boilers that have quick response and can actually dial up and dial down very quickly to really respond to heavy loads, and then times of not much use, in which case then they're going to run much more efficiently.
Do you see that kind of becoming the new normal with some of the small breweries? Do you think that they're kind of moving away from fire tube boilers for those reasons?
I think so. My experience with boiler selection isn't all that great compared to the rest of the steam system, as you probably recall from the brewing engineering course. But quite honestly, in the St. Louis area, we've seen quite an influx of this type of arrangement and the new craft breweries that are coming in around here.
Okay, cool. What about high pressure versus low pressure boilers? I see a lot of craft brewers trying to run low pressure boilers, very near the maximum pressure, so that they have to do that so they can get an adequate boil in their brew kettle oftentimes. Do you have any advice for folks that find themselves in that situation where they're trying to operate a low pressure boiler, at near its upper limits? Not especially. I hadn't really considered that, but I really don't think that that's such a great idea to press a boiler to its limits. To me, it makes more sense to, particularly if the steam has to be distributed to a considerable distance before you get to the process area, it might make sense to generate at that higher pressure and then reduce down. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And
that's really for piping, not only for the pressure loss that you're going to incur, but I mean, you can make a smaller piping choice as well when you're in that situation.
Right, which helps to offset the higher cost, that you sometimes get with the higher pressure boiler, at least if you're not spending so much money on the installation cost too, right?
Correct.
Okay, now your article covers the concepts of allowable accumulation, operating gap, and simmering in regards to safety valves, both on the boiler as well as at the points of steam delivery. And I must admit, I've seen a lot of simmering in craft breweries over the years. I'm guessing because folks either aren't always aware of the required operating gaps, or they're just, pushing the limits on equipment that wasn't sized correctly in the first place. Could you take a minute to explain simmering and let our listeners know whether it's inefficient, dangerous, or both?
I would say probably both, and frankly, it just wears the valve out, because you end up with wire draw characteristics on the seating surfaces. But to explain it, I think a lot of folks think that, okay, just because I select a safety valve at the maximum allowable working pressure of the vessel, we're not talking on the boiler now, we'll be talking on the process equipment. ASME states that your protection device has to be at MAWP, it can't be above. So people just think that you can operate very closely to that set pressure, when there are norms that, depending on the seat design of the valve, that limit you probably to somewhere around 80 to 90%. So there's your pressure limiter right there.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, MAWP is maximum allowable working pressure, which Steve also defines in his article in the TQ. Okay, Steve, let's talk about the potential gap between boiler installation and ongoing maintenance. Is it possible to ruin a brand new boiler very quickly without proper chemical injection and monitoring? And how can a brewer be sure they've selected the right company to provide those services? In other words, how do you vet a vendor for competency to be sure they're following today's best practices?
Well, that's a good one. I would say that there are certain norms as far as analytical measurements that you're going to make for your feed water and condensate. And so whether you're doing that yourself with the instrumentation that's commercially available now, or your calibration service will do that in terms of inspecting and the like. I can't tell you who's going to be good and who's going to be bad in terms of who's going to treat your feed water for you. But I think there's probably people in industry in your local area that could probably do so. So I would think recommendations there would be to consult people that have had good experiences with a good house.
Have you seen someone ruin a brand new boiler fast like that without, because they didn't put in the proper treatment program out of the gate?
I'm sure it's possible, but frankly, I've not seen that, or not heard of that. So,
okay,
I can't really answer that.
No worries. Steve, I sat in one of your recent lectures during the Master Brewers Engineering and Utilities course, which is a fantastic course, by the way, and I really enjoyed your lecture. And I was especially glad to see you call out a mistake that I have been noticing in almost every craft brewery I've visited recently. Could you please explain to listeners why steam drops, so going from your header to your equipment, should always go up before they go down?
Absolutely. I mean, the job of the steam distribution system is to deliver dry, high-quality steam to its point of use, the heat exchanger, the work boiler, whatever we're going to call the heat exchanger. And if the piping just drops out of the bottom of the piping, you're going to end up, frankly, with a lot of carryover condensate that occurs. You say, well, that's a steam pipe. Why would there be condensate in it? But even insulated steam pipe isn't going to be 100% efficient. So there will be some heat loss that occurs in distribution piping, just trying to transport the steam from the boiler to its point of use. So good practice indicates that the takeoff is on top of the pipe. And then the downcomer piping to the heat exchanger, your job's not done. You really need to drip trap that to ensure that the condensate that's going to gather at that point, particularly ahead of any valve that might close, is going to be dripped off as well. And again, that's to assure that you're going to have high quality steam going to the heat exchanger.
That's right. It's amazing to me how often I see this not piped correctly. I don't know if it's just that there's a lot of pipe fitters out there that don't know this, or I'm not sure why it is. But do you have any recommendations for folks that are trying to install a new plant so that they get this kind of stuff right? Is there kind of a go-to to have someone look over your steam pipe plan to make sure that stuff like this is designed properly in the first place?
Well, yeah. Frankly, a company like ours has been involved in that for almost 90 years, and I've gained a lot of experience
probably have
myself.
A pretty good idea how to do it if you've been doing it for 90 years, I'd say.
Well, I'm not 90 years old. But
your company, I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know you're not 90. Come on. Cool. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to mention to listeners in terms of, consideration for boilers or steam? I really thought your article was quite good. I hope everybody reads it. I think anybody who doesn't kind of understand the basics of a steam system, it's certainly worth spending a few minutes reading the article. So thanks for writing it. But do you have anything else you'd like to mention to listeners before we hop off?
Just that steam systems in and of themselves are really a different animal, and it does take a unique expertise to be able to really do things right. And I realize that there may be educational opportunities that aren't taken, or there's not that many that pipe fitters may think that this is like a water system, and it doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of education to tools out there. You know, some of the manufacturers have online, what they call university courses, and
right.
In fact, I have a live steam lab in my office that we use for practitioners that come in, and we show actually how steam and condensate behaves under glass. It's glass piping. So, there's a number of people that do this sort of thing, and I think that I would advise anyone who doesn't have good knowledge of steam systems to try and get some before you make a big investment.
Good advice, Steve. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today, and thanks for everything you do for Master Brewers. And those of you out there listening, if you want to get a little more education on steam and lots of other utilities and systems that happen in the brewery, be sure to consider the Master Brewers 2-week course, because it's definitely a good one. Steve, have a great day. Thanks for joining us.